Mr. Speaker, the High Court in its judgment stated very clearly that the constituency is not a service delivery unit. It is an electoral unit, affirming the decision of the Supreme Court that was in Supreme Court, that the Supreme Court delivered. The second thing that the High Court stated in its judgment, it stated that NGCDF violates the principle of separation of powers by assigning executive functions to members of parliament whose primary constitutional role is legislative. Again, Mr. Speaker, this was a total misunderstanding by the High Court. We made every effort to explain to them how a constituency is a delivery unit. Under the National Government Coordination Act, Section 14, a constituency has been made as a service delivery unit. Mr. Speaker, this particular section has not been nullified, neither has it been declared to be unconstitutional. So, for us as members of parliament, we wondered how can the High Court declare that the constituency is just merely an electoral unit. Yet we know that there is an act of parliament which clearly states that a constituency is a service delivery unit. It is not meant to be for purposes of voting only. The second thing, Mr. Speaker, is the misunderstanding also of the High Court, that the members of parliament are the managers of the NGCDF fund. Mr. Speaker, we left at this point, we tried to tell them, but it looks like they put wool in their ears. Mr. Speaker, we all know that the members of parliament do not sit in the constituency committees. We never sit there. Two, we don't play any role. In fact, the only role we play, Mr. Speaker, is that we participate with all our voters in identifying the projects, and we all sit. We all sit. It's a public participation. That is, I'm being assisted by Honorable Alice, who knows very well what she does in a constituency in Thika town. Mr. Speaker, when I go for public participation, I don't sit with the NGCDF officials. I sit with the voters, and I am a participant. And I also identify projects which I think the NGCDF must fund. Mr. Speaker, you know there was one question that we were asked and you know you presented this matter. And he was asked at that time, are you sure if I come to your constituency, I will not find schools that bear the name Honorable Kaluma and NGCDF? We told them, no, just come. But they refused to come, Mr. Speaker. And yet they still went ahead and stated that the members of parliament are active participants in the implementation of NGCDF projects, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have never participated in them. I have not opened them. When they are being opened by the NGCDF committee, I also participate also to go and hear what they are saying. And I'm very happy that they have done a good job, Mr. Speaker. The only thing I do, Mr. Speaker, is when I am around in the constituency, I do my oversight role under Section 95. As you know, the work of a member of parliament under Section 95 of the Constitution is oversight, representation, legislation, and budgeting, Mr. Speaker. And we allocate resources, and we don't go and spend. Mr. Speaker, there is no member of parliament here who walks around with a checkbook or who is a signatory of NGCDF funds in any bank, Mr. Speaker. We don't sit, neither do we appoint the fund managers. In fact, in the ruling of the High Court, they say that the term of the fund manager is tied to that one of the member of parliament. I don't know where they got that story. It is not true. The fund manager is a permanent employee of the NGCDF board. Yes. It has not held office for 5 years. Even if he or she holds office, she holds office at the pleasure of the NGCDF board, not at the pleasure of the member of parliament. There is a misunderstanding, Mr. Speaker, from the judiciary generally. Mr. Speaker, we have made various attempts as a house. And every time the courts find a reason Mr. Speaker, this is the House which appropriates money. This is the House which will pass constitutional amendments. Mr. Speaker, which is this constitution amendment that is lacking in the current constitution? We have identified which they have a problem. That is the NGCDF Act, the Senate Oversight Funds, and then CAF. Mr. Speaker, we want to remove these funds from the courts, Mr. Speaker. We want to know what is unconstitutional once now they have been entrenched in the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. It is, Mr. Speaker, let me tell you, you know, when we appeared before this three-judge bench, and when we were arguing, we said that these bursaries that is being given by NGCDF has benefited very many students. It was unknown to me that the young lawyers who were in court were beneficiaries of NGCDF. When we completed our arguments, they came to us and told us, why didn't you use us as exhibit? Because we are beneficiaries of NGCDF. If there was no NGCDF bursary, we would not have been lawyers. Mr. Speaker, you can see what people are seeking to do, to disenfranchise members of our communities, the indigent in our society. Mr. Speaker, we should not accept this. We must entrench these funds in the Constitution to secure their future and secure the future of our children and our communities, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the evolving jurisprudence underscores the need to provide a firm constitutional foundation for the NGCDF to ensure its sustainability. This entrenchment, Mr. Speaker, will provide legal certainty to the funds framework, offering stability for long-term planning and implementation of constituency-based projects, Mr. Speaker. The second thing that it will do, it will promote equitable development by guaranteeing that all constituencies, including marginalized communities, Mr. Speaker, continue to benefit from the necessary infrastructure and services that they so deserve. Mr. Speaker, as you know, Article 95 of the Constitution is extremely very clear. I don't know why the courts have a problem with it. It states, for the avoidance of doubt, that members of parliament resolve issues that are of concern to the people by enacting the NGCDF, then CAF, the Senate Oversight Fund, Mr. Speaker, and entrenching the Constitution. We will be resolving issues that are of concern to our people, Mr. Speaker. If you go to my constituency, we have very many dilapidated schools that were built using Arambe's in those many years. Mud walls. I have seen pictures from the Honorable Marianne Keitan's schools, which are still in form of mud. So you wonder whether these are cow dens or where people go to school, Mr. Speaker. This NGCDF has assisted to convert some of those classrooms so that they can become habitable classrooms. The third thing that we are seeking to do, Mr. Speaker, is to enhance service delivery by ensuring that critical community development initiatives are implemented efficiently and effectively at the constituency level. Mr. Speaker, this is the only fund, Mr. Speaker, that is known by all Kenyans, and it has served them. We know, and Kenyans have always told us, this is the only fund which has value for money. Why? Because the management funds, the management, the fees or the salaries that is paid out of these funds, Mr. Speaker, is only merely 5%. 95% goes to the projects, Mr. Speaker. We know other institutions which I don't want to mention, and you know. 49% is used for profits, is used for management. So the only thing that goes allowances, and the only, I'm being assisted here by Honorable Leli Mengit, he knows in his constituency he's been suffering the same thing. We know, Mr. Speaker, that it is only 51% which goes to the project. 49% is used for other purposes. And so entrenching this fund in the Constitution will ensure that we get value for money. Mr. Speaker, I want to mention three things why we think that this matter should be entrenched. All these funds must be entrenched in the Constitution. The first thing, Mr. Speaker, it will strengthen accountability and oversight mechanisms for the management of the fund. Mr. Speaker, as you know, without a proper constitutional framework, oversight becomes very difficult. But when we have a proper constitutional framework for these funds, Mr. Speaker, we would be able to oversight them. There would be proper accountability. The second thing, this legislative proposal seeks to support the national government's mandate to facilitate development at the constituency level, Mr. Speaker. As you know, the only fund that has helped the government is this fund. Particularly those concurrent functions, like for instance, the sports, which was declared unconstitutional, the climate change or environment that was declared unconstitutional, the ICT labs that these members of parliament are now building. We have seen what those computers that have been installed in those centers have done and transformed the local community, and particularly the youth. We have seen the youth earning. In my constituency, we went with the PS the other day, last month, and we visited one of the hubs. And we had very interesting stories. There are students who are making $100 per week. That is 13,000 shillings, Mr. Speaker. Now, without those ones, and they came from very poor families. So, Mr. Speaker, this will ensure that the constituency benefits. The third thing, Mr. Speaker, and finally, is to foster inclusive growth and empower constituencies to address their unique development challenges effectively, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I am urging members, and I want to thank members who have supported this legislative initiative. Mr. Speaker, it has been endorsed by over 258 members. The only reason why the others did not sign, Mr. Speaker, is because they are involved in the arrangement and organization of the East African Games. They are in Mombasa. Mr. Speaker, if all of them were here, and I can assure you, 344 minus those ones who are not MPs here. You know, we have vacant seats, about 4 of them. Others, we would have had all the 349, Mr. Speaker. So I want to assure you, there is no member who refused to sign. Every member supported, Mr. Speaker. And I want to assure you that this particular legislative proposal will go a long way in resolving the marginalization of communities and people in our constituencies. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you. These are very important comments, and I hope that the Justice and Legal Affairs will move fairly quickly to obtain views from the constitutional offices together with the Attorney General, so that this particular legislative proposal can be published soon thereafter when we come back from our recess. And I see, you can see even the Honorable Salasha is in the House. For good reason, Mr. Speaker. He has also suffered a lot of things in the constituency, particularly the NGCTF, Mr. Speaker. That is the reason he is here, to support and to rally members to support this, Mr. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is true that the proposal to amend the Constitution is now just about to come to this House with a statement that has been made by the Honorable Chepkonga, and that this House must now get itself ready so that we are able to move on and effect the proposed constitutional changes, which include entrenching the 3 funds in the Constitution. There are other constitutional amendment proposals that are just about to be brought. Some of them will come as separate bills. Others may come as recommendations for referendum, and all this House is going to consider. Honorable Chepkonga has actually explained that the reason why we have to entrench these funds with the special emphasis on the national government CDF is due to the fact that the courts have constantly pronounced themselves in a manner which we have never agreed with, but which we have tried to rectify. But even as of late, as just the other day, the court was bold enough again to pronounce itself declaring the NGCDF Act unconstitutional. There is a pending appeal on this, and there is even a proposal that we should be amending the act to comply with whatever it is they are saying. But at the end of the day, there must be an end to everything that is an issue. Now that we are being told that the NGCDF is unconstitutional, we are going to make it constitutional. And nobody whatsoever will be able to say again, forever and ever, that CDF is not constitutional. I know Honorable Gishimo, Honorable Chepkonga, and the whole team has actually come up with a draft proposal on these funds. We know actually His Excellency the President, who supports the CDF to the hilt, sent to us a memorandum saying he means to have these funds entrench the Constitution. Therefore, we are not engaged in an exercise in futility. It is the high time we realized this dream, which dream is actually in the core heart of Kenyans. We've previously said this: go to the rural areas, especially our rural constituencies. The only visible development you'll be able to see is that from CDF. The governors, who actually we think have always had a hand in these court decisions, most of them being busybodies anyway, the governors have actually not done much with all these billions they get. When they are asked, oh, the money is not sufficient, oh, we have expenses, we have all these things. While NGCDF is the only way the national government can actually show to the country that the government is developing the rural areas. That argument of MPs being involved, this has been tackled through statutory amendments. And as we speak today, I have gone through the NGCDF. I cannot point out any place where a member of parliament is involved. So what is next after what Honorable Chepkonga has done? It's a proposal that is being mooted. We will actually commit it to some of the stakeholders, including the Office of the Honorable Attorney General, the constitutional offices that are supposed to look at this, so that we receive and collate views. After this is done and everything is put in place, the bill will now be published as a constitutional amendment bill. We have looked at the provisions of the Constitution, and we are satisfied that this bill does not require a referendum. So this House, as constituted, provided we are able to raise 2/3 majority, will be able to entrench these funds in the Constitution. So we will be doing this as soon as possible. I assure Honorable Chepkonga, I assure the Honorable House, that we will not sit on our laurels. As soon as this is done, we will move out there. We are going to ensure the views are collected and collated, and the bill is back in the House for publication, for reading, public participation, and debate. We are entrenching the Senate Oversight Fund so that senators also are well equipped to take care of their roles in the counties. And we always remind senators that their role is to oversight what happens in the counties, not to spend all the time summoning cabinet secretaries, bringing everybody here to ask questions, which most of those questions are not their reserve. They are the reserve of the National Assembly. The ladies have the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, the GAF. And when we finish with this, we will be doing what is called legislation thereunder, under the constitutional provision. And we will have clear principles on, number one, how much money will be allocated to GAF from the national government share, how much would go to the Senate Oversight Fund, and where that money will come from, and how much of the national government fund would go to GAF. so that no arguments arise as to this is what I'm entitled to. No, that is not what you're entitled to. There is no pushing forth, back and forth regarding the money. So let's embrace ourselves for this. I think it's a high time. As soon as we come back in February, we move with speed and entrench, especially the national government CDF, into the constitution. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Murugara. Honorable members, you have a maximum of 10 minutes to contribute, but because of time and interest, we could reduce. If you can finish early, you do so.
Reduce to 3 minutes.
The Honorable Chair of the Committee in charge of CDF, the Honorable Musa Sima. Honorable Wanjala, sit down.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to give my view on this issue of the entrenchment of the constitution of the various funds, the NGCDF, the Senate Oversight, and National Government Affirmative Action, which is the funds which develop this country. Mr. Speaker, the CDF has been very instrumental in terms of construction of schools, in terms of school fees for our children. And Mr. Speaker, all those who are against are people who have retired and do not have children in school. In fact, what we need to do is to ask them to continue taking care of their grandchildren so that they can appreciate CDF. Because CDF goes across the whole spectrum of the country, including in all stages in life. So we want to say what has happened in Kenya is monumental, and it is going to make Kenya highly developed. Mr. Speaker, as we go around, even when we are amending the 2023 Act of NGCDF to address the court matters, it seemed that whatever we did was zero because it was a predetermined decision by the courts to remove CDF from us. And Mr. Speaker, the public were really looking forward for the moment we are in now, that we bring it and put it under the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, this is, I want to thank Honorable Chepkonga and the team who have put together this. And Mr. Speaker, we want Kenya to move forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Musa Sirma. Let us conscript it to 3 minutes, if possible. The Honorable Mule Stephen, because he had earlier proposal, similar proposal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, today is one of the brightest days in this house, whereby we want to give Kenyans the best Christmas by making sure that justice is being done, not through the court, but through this house. By working on a process whereby we make sure we entrench the three funds which touch the core of this nation, the Wanjiku, the Mutiso, the Kamau, the Otieno in this country. Mr. Speaker, we worked very hard with Honorable Kishimo in the beginning of this parliament to make sure that these funds are safeguarded, because we had seen the danger of influx of people who don't want development in our constituency. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank Honorable Chepkonga and Honorable Otieno Amolo for bringing this back. And I want to thank the Speaker, Honorable Moses Wetangula, for allowing the initial proposals to be part and parcel of consideration of entrenching these three funds. Mr. Speaker, without fear of ever of contradiction in this country, the only projects which make sense to Kenyans are projects which are done at the constituency level, especially on the education sector, the security sector, and making sure that our kids get bursaries to school. Mr. Speaker, as Honorable Chepkonga alluded, we members of parliament, we are not part and parcel of management and micromanagement of CDF fund in this country. We are only patrons, and we play our role as legislators on oversight, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to assure Kenyans in the entire country who have made numerous calls to me and Honorable Kishimo, what is happening on this? I want to tell them we have a Christmas for all Kenyans to be delivered by this house early February when the house resumes from recess. Mr. Speaker, it is important to make sure that the women of this house have at least a fund to make sure that they are active at the constituency level and the county level where they are. We want to make sure, Mr. Speaker, going forward, the senators who will be elected going forward in this country at least have resource to make sure that they oversight the counties. I know the governors went to court to support this case so that the senators are limited power and financial muscle to make sure that they oversight them. We want to do the right thing right now, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that those three funds are extremely important, which are extremely important in this country, are entrenched in the Constitution and become part and parcel of the supreme law of this country, and nobody can touch them anymore. Mr. Speaker, I want to urge all members to make sure that when the time comes of reckoning to be with your people who has brought you to this house, we be all of us, we create the 2/3 and entrench these funds in the Constitution and give Kenyans a piece of their mind and students a piece of their mind for the prosperity and the great nation called Kenya. God bless Kenyans. I wish you a happy Christmas, happy New Year, and the New Year we'll have good news for you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Emilio Diambo, the Minority Whip. Because
thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Rank.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the mover. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that indeed one of the reasons that people have been fighting the CDF is because of the issue of separation of powers. And Mr. Speaker, if there's one thing that we need to consider is that in this generation we didn't know that we'd have IT. The world changes. And the concept of separation of powers is good. But there are instances where there must be exception to the rule where things are working. And because of that, Mr. Speaker, I know the format that we are trying to take is to try and what we have been doing, distance members as much as possible from CDF. And it should, even in the format that it is framed. But the fact that you have that fund that the public generally associates with members of parliament has actually brought a significant change in our constituencies, especially areas that hitherto been marginalized, areas that do not normally support governments, like in our areas that we've been primarily opposition for years. Funds would not come to us. And that is why it's important that we have money from going to governors and money going to an NGCDF fund. I sit in the budget committee, and Mr. Speaker, even though it is provided constitutionally that funds shall be spread out in an equitable, first equally and in some instances equitably, but the reality is that that doesn't happen. You will find that funds are always allocated in a skewed manner and mostly usually favors areas that are voted for governments. But Mr. Speaker, what happens at our local levels? If NGCDF doesn't reach one corner of your constituency, you are gone as an MP, whether or not you are involved in it. And Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't want us, Mr. Speaker, to follow procedure at the expense of justice. And that is why even in our 2010 Constitution, we departed from technicalities to ensure there is fairness. And therefore, I really welcome this. Bring the constitutional bill. We will support it fully. My constituency will support it fully.
The Honorable Raphael Wanjala, because of status and rank.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me a chance to contribute on this important motion. Mr. Speaker, I did serve in Parliament since 1997. And Mr. Speaker, you would come to Parliament, finish 5 years, without doing anything in the constituency, apart from holding Harambes. And Mr. Speaker, at that time, Harambes, the salary in Parliament here was only 70,000. That is the time, Mr. Speaker, where you are hearing of defections, because people would line up at State House to get even 20, 15,000 to go and do Harambes. But Mr. Speaker, we sat down in the year 1997, when we were about to end. That was about the year 1999 to 2000. It was very difficult, Mr. Speaker. Members of Parliament would sleep outside our houses. No man, members of Parliament would walk without a biker, because anytime you would be arrested, charged in court, beaten by police, because the president does not want you to be independent. That is when we brought the Parliamentary Service Commission and Constituency Development Fund, Mr. Speaker. It wasn't easy, Mr. Speaker. And when Honorable Raila, whom we were with here, fought equally and with the Kibaki to help us come up with the CDF after the year 2002, when Moi had gone, he went further during BBI time. He told these members of Parliament, please let's entrench this in the Constitution. Sometimes you members of Parliament, you are enemies of yourselves, because you don't want to see far. You want things that serve your interest. But let's serve the country. Today you go to Busia County. Yesterday they were rating them to be number 3, to have used their money very well. But Mr. Speaker, you will never see anything done by the county except the billboard for things done by CDF. No any other thing outside this the county. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, if there is anything that should be supported, and what is being supported by all Kenyans, is National Government CDF Fund. Mr. Speaker, we have come from far. And that is why I have always proposed that when even on the issue of budgeting, if we got roads and we have 700 billion for
Honorable Wanjala, you will be added exactly 1 minute. Ensure you are done within 1 minute.
And Mr. Speaker, that's why I've always proposed, even for roads, if we have 700 billion, Mr. Speaker, and we have only 290 constituencies, why don't we every year say each constituency gets 1 billion, then the balance we leave for the leadership to know where to take it, where they have interest, so that you, as Mr. Speaker, in your constituency, you will decide which road can you start tamaking. By 5 years, you will have tamaked so many roads. But Mr. Speaker, here you find one constituency has 15 billion when the others have none. This type of budgeting is killing us as members of Parliament. Let's sit down and even have kamkunji on these issues, so that we talk. We used to talk even with Moi, who was a dictator, but he would call us in kamkunji in the Senate, today's Parliament for Senate, and we would discuss and agree.
Honorable Wanjala, withdraw references to the second president of the country.
I withdraw, Mr. Speaker.
He always served as an elected president.
I withdraw, Mr. Speaker, because of where I'm coming from.
Thank you. Thank you. The Honorable Pukose, the Chair, Departmental Committee on Health.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, on the onset, I want to thank the Honorable Jeb Konga, together with you, Honorable Speaker, and others, Tienda Amolo as the co-sponsor, Murungara, and all our legal colleagues in this House for having put a lot of effort to make sure that, and those who signed, I'm being reminded by the Honorable Alice Nganga, the member for Thika Town, that her and me signed. So we have to thank ourselves for signing to make sure that we went beyond the threshold for the 2/3, because 258 members signed this, which is beyond 2/3, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, on the onset, I think this is the most developed fund in as far as development is concerned, where you have 95% of it going into development projects, going into bursaries, and be able to make impact within the community. On the other onset, when we compare with our devolution process, if the funds in the county governments had been devolved to the wards, I think we would have been able to see development. Unfortunately, we devolve corruption to the counties because many of the, when you move around here in Nairobi, it is shameful, Honorable Speaker, because you hear that building belongs to a CEC from a certain county, that house belongs to the governor from a certain county. Then you wonder, really, some of us have been in this house maybe for even 3 or 5 years, and that kind of house is what you cannot afford. So how could a CEC who has just served for 1 year be able to afford that? So, and then even when you travel out of the country, you hear a certain mall in Dubai belongs to a certain governor, a certain mall in Turkey belongs to a certain governor. Now, Honorable Speaker, I think we got it wrong in as far as devolution is concerned. And therefore, this CDF must be protected because the impact is enormous to the society. With those comments, Honorable Speaker, I look forward to waiting for the bill in the next year, and I want to wish each and everyone a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Robert Gichimu will be followed by Honorable James Nikal, then Honorable Karoli Omondi.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Indeed, it's a great moment for the Kenyans. And this sends a very strong signal to the enemies of the people of this country. The busybodies who have been going to court to challenge NGCDF, which has been very effective at the constituency level. Honorable Speaker, let me join the chorus of the honorable members to confirm that this is the only fund that has been very effective in this country in terms of devolved development by way of decentralization by the national government. And I wish that even the county governments can be able to emulate this fund so that they can also be able to devolve the funds which rest at the county government to the ward levels, just like the way the national government has been able to devolve funds to the constituency level. Honorable Speaker, let me thank us all as members of parliament for having appended signatures in support of this legislative proposal, which eventually will become into a bill and eventually a law. I'm very, very optimistic that it will become the national government decentralized fund act at some point. And if the problem was development, then let us use the word decentralized. So if that has been the problem, but the effect will still remain the same. And I confirm, like in my constituency, Geshogu, we have numerous development projects that my people and I boast having been funded by NGCDF. Numerous schools with tiles, well renovated, very modern classrooms, even the ICT hubs that we are building or that are being built through the NGCDF committees is also being funded by this NGCDF. So the young youth of this nation will also find some place to boast out of this fund, which is called NGCDF. So without much ado, I'm looking forward. And my people are even calling and asking when we let go for public participation at the constituency level so that I can be able to support it and become law, that we entrench it in the constitution. And with those many remarks or few remarks, I wish every member of this house Merry Christmas and a happy new year. And
The Honorable James Wambura Nyikal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, there is no single government fund that has had the impact that these three devolved funds have had, particularly the National Government Constituency Development Fund. Mr. Speaker, there is no single constituency in this country, particularly in the area of education, where you cannot find classrooms that have been done by this fund. There's no single constituency where you can't find a number of students, now even professionals, who have become professionals because of the bursary that is given by these funds. Mr. Speaker, there is no fund that has, where the people have access to, like the national government's Constituency Development Fund. When a school burns down, when the school is blown, the roof is blown by the wind, the people merely approach the chair of the national government Constituency Development Fund, and within a week, some action is taken. There is no single government fund, as long that I know of, that people have access to like this fund. Mr. Speaker, there is no fund that I know of that actually really practices the principle of public participation. I think long before people started talking of public participation, the National Government Constituency Development Fund was in the thick of public participation, and that is where the involvement of members of parliament is. As leaders in the constituency, we must take part in public participation when these funds are actually being disbursed, or the proposals being made for their disbursement in our constituencies. Mr. Speaker, there is no fund which has been as cost-effective as this fund. When we have classrooms done by county government for ECD, by the national government Ministry of Education, the cost is almost twice what we have here. The claim that actually it violates the separation of powers, or those found by the High Court to be so, is really not true. We just participate, have public participation, then we oversight it like any other fund. And Mr. Speaker, as I end, if something helps the people, that is the basic issue that any effort in government should be. If we find a principle helps the people, why do we want to kill it? Then just change the law, if the law does not mention it, so that if all they want, let it be so. I support you.
The Honorable Karoli Omondi.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Let me begin by saying, number one, I'm fully in support of this proposal, and I was the first one to sign it, actually. And also, number two, let the word go forth from here to the rest of the world that CDF will never die in Kenya. It will never die. We will keep amending the law, I've said it before, until such time that the courts will be happy with whatever we will have. That said, Honorable Speaker, I think there's a misconception that when MPs sit down with their constituents to select priority projects, that there's an infringement of the doctrine of separation of powers. When you go to an election and you present a manifesto and you win, you are given a mandate to do two things: to prioritize development projects for your people, because that's the basis upon which they voted for you, and you are given the budget-making power, whether it is a parliamentary system or a presidential system like the one we have. And once you have that power, you are not breaching the doctrine of separation of powers, because you've been given a mandate. That is why budget-making power sits with those in authority, those who have been elected. And if you go to the Westminster model, the same MPs who make budget are the same ones who oversight the implementation of budget. I completely don't understand this nuance the courts are saying, that MPs sitting down with their constituents, having been elected, are violating the doctrine of separation of powers. When you present your manifesto and you are elected, whether in a parliamentary system or a presidential system. You have the mandate to prioritize development, to make budgets, and to oversight the budget implementation. So I think we need to go back and have this discussion with the courts. Secondly, I think CDF has the best accountability mechanism of all the funds of government. There's no overpricing, there's no excessive profit. It helps with money circulation at the grassroots. There are no pending bills. It is the local people who end up doing most of these works after selecting them. There is no other development mechanism in the Republic that can be compared to CDF. But even if the courts say the constituency is not a development unit, is an electoral unit, there's no problem with that. Within those constituencies, there are sub-counties. So we just need to align the sub-counties within the boundaries of the constituencies. And whatever they want, we will confine it there and get it. But this is the most impactful fund in the Republic of Kenya. Finally, Honorable Speaker, let me wish everybody a Merry Christmas and start a book club in Parliament by inviting everybody to buy this book and spend the next 2 weeks reading it, Why Nations Fail. The Origins of Power, Prosperity, and...
The Honorable Lydia Ziggy, the MP for Taita Taveta.
Asante sana Bwana Spika, hata mimi kunipatia fursa ili niweze kuchangia mada hii ambayo ni mada ya muhimu sana katika nchi yetu ya Kenya. Mambo ya NGAF na mambo ya NGCDF ni masuala ambayo ni ya muhimu sana kwa sababu fedha hizi za NGAF na fedha hizi za CDF ndo na miradi ambayo inafanywa na NGAF na miradi ambayo inafanywa na CDF ndo miradi ambayo inaonekana kule mashinani. Bwana Spika, pembe zote za nchi ukitembea, majengo, mashule, shule ambazo zimeweza kupata kuboreshwa, zimeboreshwa kupitia pesa za CDF. Maofisi za machifu na vile vile masuala mengi, hata ile pesa ya kusaidia wanafunzi ya basari ambayo inayosikika sana kule mashinani, ukiuliza wananchi wanayoijua ni pesa ambazo zinatoka kwa masuala ambayo ni ya CDF, Mheshimiwa Spika, na mambo ya NGAF. Na kwa hivyo kivyovyote vile mpango mzima wa hii fedha hauwezi kusahaulika wala hauwezi futiliwa mbali. Nataka kuwapongeza wajumbe wenzangu ambao wamechukua fursa ya kufanya mchakato mzima wa kukusanya zile sahihi ili tuweze kuweza kujumuisha masuala haya katika katiba. Na mimi naunga mkono kwa sababu Mheshimiwa Spika, tumeona pesa nyingi ambazo zimetengwa kwa mambo ya devolution, kwa mambo ya county government zikienda kule, hatuzionei kazi yake sana. County nyingi tumeona kuna uzembe fulani. Tunaona wananchi wakilia masuala kama yale ya afya ambayo alipelekwa katika mambo ya devolution. Tunaona ni shida tupu. Wananchi wanalia hakuna madawa, hospitali zimezorota kabisa, na masuala mengi hata ya maji ambayo yalikuwa devolved imekuwa ni shida kule mashinani. Na kwa hivyo mara nyingi ukiwauliza fedha ambazo zimekuwa za manufaa sana ni zile za NGAF, za mama county, na zile za ambazo zinatoka kwa wajumbe za NGCDF. Na kwa hivyo mimi naunga mkono, niko katika mstari wa mbele ya kwamba tuweze kujumuisha mpango mzima huu, na hata wale masenators pia waweze kupata ile fedha ya kusimamia na kuangalia vipi county zetu zinaendeshwa katika ile oversight fund. Na kwa hivyo nashukuru sana na naunga mkono. Asante kwa kunipa hii fursa.
Honorable Adan Keinan will be followed by Honorable Naomi Wako, then the Honorable Anthony Olwach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the institution of CDF and the framers of that law have freed Parliament from the yoke of the office of the presidency and from the yoke of marginalization, Madam Speaker, generally by the members of the executive. Mr. Speaker, before we enacted NCDF, the member of Parliament was a pauper. The member of Parliament was the most disadvantaged. The member of Parliament was not respected. The Member of Parliament was not part of the national development agenda. And Madam Speaker, luckily the framers of the current constitution have equated representation to our sovereignty. Those individuals outside there who have put every effort to rubbish the role of the Member of Parliament, I think are indirectly sabotaging our constitution. Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, to my colleagues who are new, I want to tell you that what we have, the assumption outside there, through the agents of devolution, is as if there is federalism. What we have is an economic devolution. An economic devolution means bringing resources to the grassroots. But that has been abused. Mr. Speaker, historically, where I come from, I've represented two constituencies, Wajir West and Eldas. When I was first elected as a member of parliament for Wajir West, as a young legislator, Wajir West was the only constituency in the history of Kenya without a single secondary school, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, having been there for a decade plus, I left that constituency with so many secondary schools, so many primary schools, and so many other institutions, courtesy of CDF. Today, if our government was to do a thorough, formative, and summative investigation on the projects on the ground, I can tell you the only projects that are visible are the CDF-sponsored projects, CDF-implemented projects. So you, as a member of parliament, you should have no apologies whatsoever for standing firm with CDF. But I also want to believe with you, let's allow our senators to get a Senate oversight fund, because there's so much resources that has been devolved through devolution. Please, let's kill this issue of jurisdictional competition between the Senate and the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, I will be in the forefront and ensuring that our senators get resources to oversight the billions that have been allocated to the county government, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the issue of NGAF, our ladies also play a critical role in our development agenda. I want us just to think out of the box. Out of the budget of 3 trillion, why not allow a percentage of 10%, 15% through these processes, so that the elected leaders also
One minute, because of...
Do you want to be bystanders in the development agenda of this country? Do you want to watch other people and remain aloof in the implementation? How will you implement your development agenda? You have been elected on a platform. You went to the grassroots, and you know the most difficult job, the most sought after, is to be elected a member of parliament. You have no apologies to make. Let's entrench this in the constitution and to the courts. Don't get involved in legislation. Let your role be neutral apitas in interpreting the law as it is. Don't take sides. And therefore, whichever form, I want to agree with Karoli Omondi, whichever form, I want you to adapt this slogan: no CDF, no representation. No NGAV, no representation. No Senate Oversight Fund, no representation. And please, act firmly, move with speed. Time is running. You only have next year. You know, you only have one more budget cycle. The other year is election time. Nobody will be here. So you have 1 year. That 1 year, within the next 6 months, this must meet the constitutional threshold as prescribed by the courts. To our friends,
thank you.
I wish you
the Honorable Naomi Wako.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for allowing me to add my voice to this very, very important legislative proposal to amend the Constitution under Standing Order 114-7A. Honorable Speaker, matters NGCDF, matters NGAF are very special to us. Simply because it's not that it is special to us because it is coming to us, but it is because it is making a lot of difference to the people on the ground. Many poor children have received bursaries, many schools have been developed and classes built, many things have changed because of NGCDF. This has empowered the members of parliament to be relevant to their constituencies. Honorable Speaker, when it comes to NGAF, the women leaders who are here, women representatives who are the county MPs, receive only 7 million point something per constituency to make that difference. And with that little money, we've done a lot of projects, we've had some impact on the people, and it cannot be compared with what other people do. And my only request is, even as we put this into our constitution, let us see how GAF funds can be increased so that women can be empowered more, because the way they do things, we are passionate, we are hands-on, and we make a lot of difference. Honorable Speaker, the only money that can be fully accounted for is the money that goes into the hands of women leaders today. And that is why, as I advocate for this, I also want to say that we need some increment that can be considered, but the first important thing is to have this in the Constitution. Honorable Speaker, again for Senate oversights billions and billions in the counties. And it is only honorable to empower the senators to do that. With those few remarks, I wish everybody Merry Christmas, and also thank everyone, every member of parliament here, for all the support they have given us as leaders and for all the business that we have transacted. Thank you.
I'd pronounced myself on who speaks next, the Honorable Anthony Oluoch.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Let me lend my support to this proposal to entrench NGCDF into the Constitution, taking into account that the recent court's pronouncement is such that by June of 2027, the current NGCDF will cease to act. Apparently, the court did not take into account the collapse that would occur and the void that would ensue as a result of the expiry of CDF if we did not either amend or entrench this in the Constitution. Luckily, Honorable Speaker, if we do entrench this in the Constitution, we will be following one of the edicts of the court when it decided in the BBI case, when it said that there is no such thing as unconstitutional constitutional provision. And so I support that we put this in the Constitution so that we then now find what excuse the court will have, or the activists, or the counties, to want to say that the Constituency Development Fund is unconstitutional. But let us reflect back, Honorable Speaker, on what the CDF or NGCDF is a victim of. In my view, the NGCDF is a victim of central government bureaucrats. When we passed the Constitution 2010, we intended to devolve funds down to the lowest unit. The lowest unit currently, as we know, is the constituency. And I want to disagree with the court that the constituency is not a unit of development. The units of development are down from the national government. They go to the sub-counties. If you want to call it constituency, so be it. If you want to call it sub-county, but it is a unit of development. You can only go lower, which does not exist now, is at the ward level. The governments don't recognize it. The county governments don't recognize it. And so the unit that we know of that is the lowest is the sub-county and the constituency. Honorable Speaker, the CDF is also a victim of county government. The court cases that have been sponsored, not only against CDF, but also against RLMF, is sponsored by the counties themselves. There is a misnomer among county governors that money taken away from CDF would result into more money into the counties. This is a fallacy. The Constitution divides money between the national and the county government. And this money, if taken away from CDF, would still remain centralized among CDF. So it is among other reasons, Honorable Speaker, that I support that we entrench this into the Constitution and put this matter to rest once and for all. I support.
The Honorable Alice Nganga will be followed by Honorable Mwashako, then the Honorable Peter Selassie.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Just the other day, I did a research on the impact CDF has at the grassroots level. and the finding was that it is the only project that is felt every corner of this, from every corner of this nation. Honorable Speaker, whether you go to Busia, whether you go to Taita Taveta, where do people want to change those things that are working? And those ones that are not working is what they want them to remain. If you look across everywhere you go, from the tiniest project to the biggest project, they are NGCDF. And Honorable Speaker, when I was doing that research, why these projects are very important to the citizens of Kenya is because of public participation. And once you go, before even you identify the project that you want to undertake, it is the community that tells you, in this region or in this village or in this sub-county, we need this and that. So when the NGCDF committee goes forward to implement that project, that's why it has the significant or a lot of impact in that area. What I would say, moving forward, we have been told we do public participation. Every ruling is telling us to do public participation. I also would want to request the judiciary, also before they do their ruling, they also do a public participation. Because if they have done public participation, or if they have visited various constituencies, various locations, they will realize the first thing you are welcomed with is NGCDF project, whether either you are educating children through their secondary school or their tertiary colleges or universities, they use the CDF money. Honorable Speaker, whether it is in the sector of security, it is NGCDF that comes out very strongly. They put infrastructure, like I have put a modern one in my constituency, a place called Goigwa, and you see immediately you implement that project, the level of insecurity goes down. So what I would want to say is we respect the NGCDF, we support it, and I want to thank Honorable Chepkonga because of taking us through this process and through this motion and not giving up, because this is not the first time we are discussing NGCDF. We have discussed it so many times when the ruling have been made at the judiciary. We will not tire because we represent the people of this nation and we know what is good for them. And we know NGCDF is working, and what is working, let it remain.
Honorable Mashako.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika. Mheshimiwa Spika, nasimama pia kuchangia mswada huu kwamba hazina ya kitaifa ya maeneo bunge iweze kuingizwa kabisa ndani ya katiba yetu ya Kenya. Mheshimiwa Spika, ni jambo la kutia moyo wakati wananchi kule mashinani wanavyojivunia vipi CDF inavyochangia katika maendeleo ya maeneo bunge. Mheshimiwa Spika, Mheshimiwa Spika, ikumbukwe kwamba Kenya yetu imekuwa na sehemu ambazo zimebobea kwa maendeleo. Kenya yetu imekuwa na sehemu ambazo zilibaki nyuma tangu tulipopata uhuru mwaka wa 63. Mheshimiwa Spika, kama unakumbuka, kuna mswada ulikuja hapa bunge mwaka wa 65, ilikuwa inaitwa Sessional Paper of 1965, ambayo iligawanya Kenya vipande viwili. Ikagawanya kipande kimoja, ikasema ni kipande ambacho kina manufaa, basi Kenya ama serikali ya kitaifa iwekeze. Na ikagawanya kipande chengine, ikawa kwamba ni kipande ambacho si cha faida sana, ambacho kikaweza kubaki nyuma kwa miaka mingi. Mheshimiwa Spika, ingelikuwa kwamba mfumo ambao unatumika kwa hazina ya ambayo inajulikana kama CDF, ingekuwa ndio mfumo unaotumika hata kugawanya pesa ambazo zinaenda kuchangia mambo ya barabara, unaoenda kuangazia mambo ya maji, unaoenda kuangazia mambo yote, hata ile pesa inaenda kwa elimu katika nchi yetu. Mheshimiwa Spika, basi Kenya yote ingekuwa basi imeendelea kwa sawa, hatungekuwa na maeneo ambayo yamebaki nyuma. So Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi niseme kwamba hii zina ya CDF inatakikana sana ichungwe, na si ichungwe tu na wabunge, hata serikali ya kitaifa yatakana ijue kwamba hii ndio hazina peke yake ambayo inafikia mwananchi wa kule mashinani kabisa. Mheshimiwa Spika, Mheshimiwa Spika, niseme tena kwamba pesa hizi za CDF leo hii zinasomesha watoto ambao hawangekuwa wameweza kwenda shule, Mheshimiwa Spika. Na sababu decisions ama maamuzi yanafanyika kule mashinani, basi Mheshimiwa Spika, wanaweza kufikia wale maskini hohehahe ambao hawangeweza kufanikiwa na ndoto zao za elimu, Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa Spika, niseme tena kile ambacho kinatia moyo sana, Mheshimiwa Spika, hazina ile ya CDF 6% peke yake ndio inatumika kugharamia mishahara na kugharamia zile allowances za ile kamati ambayo inasimamia. Ingekuwa basi hata magatuzi yetu, hii devolution, ingekuwa county zetu basi zimewekewa 1% ya chini namna hiyo ya kugharamia mishahara na zile marupurupu, basi tungeona maendeleo yanafanywa na county zetu, Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwa hivyo tuseme tu sisi kama wabunge na Kenya nzima tu support ama tuunge mkono swala hili, ili hata hazina pesa za maji, za barabara, za
It was the Honorable Peter Salasia to speak next.
Mr. Speaker, okay. Thank you so much. Mr. Speaker, I want to stand in support of this motion sponsored by Honorable Member Honorable Chepkonga. And I want to thank him because of the seriousness he has shown in terms of mobilizing the number of the people to support it. And that is why I've said that I have to be here until we finish up this motion. The reason why I do support the CDF is because with the CDF, it is strengthening us. It has given us, even the House, to have more powers to oversight the executive. I think because of the CDF, we will not even be found ourselves to go to the State House to seek for development. We'll be here and even criticize the government when we have seen they have made any mistake without fear of not being selective when it comes to giving up development. You look at and I want to thank they come up with the social media. The members of parliament, they are doing a lot of work, but it's only that some of them, they are not on social media. And that is why some of the Kenyans cannot understand the work that they are doing in their constituencies. But I'm happy that right now the members of this nation have now noted the importance of the CDF funds. And you look at the presentation of Honorable Member Chepkonga, he has said that there's no any member of parliament who works with those checkbooks. So when you realize that they are saying that we are also deliberating on micromanaging the CDF, it becomes a double stand. You look at how the CDF has been made, it's being operated by the 7 members of the committee. And this is something that Kenyans need to understand and know why the CDF with only 38 billion, you can see across the country, you can see a lot of work compared to the 380 billion going to the counties. And that is why we really need now to go and look at why the counties are having a lot of problems in terms of service delivery is because of the wage bill. You look at the CDF, they do not have the wage bill problems. Only the 7 members which are entitled to the allowances and with the maximum number of the meetings they have to meet. So we want also to call upon the Senate or whoever is in charge about the counties. Because the counties, the wage bill all the way from the community village administrator, ward, all the way sub-county, or chief officer, and we find that the wage bill is taking about 70 or 60% of the entire budget. So we must look at how the counties can reduce their budget so that our people can continue to get the development. Lastly, maybe Speaker, is just also to ask on the issue of the roads, that even how the roads are being, Honorable Member Wanjala has contributed.
Thank you, Honorable Salasia. The Honorable Joanna Ngeno will be followed by Honorable Mary Emase, then Honorable Paul Mwirigi, Honorable Robert Basil, and Honorable Thuku Kwenya, in that order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Joanna Ngeno came here before you.
Thank you, Speaker, for protecting me. Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank the member for AJAABU, Mheshimiwa Chepkonga, for actually making it right, looking at the law, answering the questions that are answered by members of the public. Mr. Speaker, NGCDF has been going round corners and I don't know, so many changes, Mr. Speaker, because some few people feel that NGCDF do not deserve to serve the people of this republic. Mr. Speaker, I remember an American called David Thoreau, who once said, or he once wrote an article called Civil Disobedience. Mr. Speaker, civil disobedience means disobeying the laws that you know are unjust. Mr. Speaker, I believe the rulings which have been made by the courts severally has been parts of those laws that the people of this republic should civilly disobey. I say so because Mr. Speaker, CDF, NGCDF, whatever name it has been named, just like what my colleagues have said, salvaged the image of the people of this republic. NGCDF managed to equalize many areas, Mr. Speaker, which has always been marginalized. Mr. Speaker, NGCDF has brought value to the society. NGCDF has made people who would not have accessed education, Mr. Speaker, to access education. NGCDF, Mr. Speaker, has made people access roads, access many things that would have not have happened in this republic, Mr. Speaker. The reason why I feel this continuous litigation against NGCDF, Mr. Speaker, is because of just sibling rivalry. There are some members of the counties who feel members of parliament, when they oversee these NGCDF, they make inroads in the society. Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank Yep Konga and say, let us entrench this in the Constitution, allow it to work. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I wish to wish members of this House and the members of this country Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I also wish to take this opportunity, Speaker, to invite members of this House and members of the public to attend a session in Kapkatet, Mr. Speaker, which is called Kalenjin Music Festival, Mr. Speaker. That will be a great moment for all of us to attend. Mr. Speaker, you are invited. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'd said the Honorable Mary Emase.
Can I have the mic? Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity. I also would like to support the proposed amendment to the Constitution to anchor NGCDF, NGAF funds, and the Senate oversight funds into the Constitution. Honorable Speaker, NGCDF is the best thing that ever happened to this country. So it must be protected, it must be defended, and it must be celebrated. Because, and at this juncture, Honorable Speaker, I want to appreciate, congratulate and applaud all the leaders who established NGCDF. Honorable Speaker, one of the reasons why there is discontentment, people are not happy in certain quarters or parts of the country, is because of the feeling of exclusivity. Exclusivity in development, exclusivity in appointments, exclusivity in many things. But NGCDF, I dare say, was the first equalizer, because I'm told before the promulgation of the Constitution, development used to follow regions that were politically correct. But today, every region, irrespective of your political affiliations, you get the basic development, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, it should not be lost in the minds of those individuals that are persistently hell-bent in killing NGCDF, that this NGCDF, first of all, these are monies derived from the national government share of revenue. And secondly, this is a fund that is very successful. Today, we have children of the poor, the most vulnerable, accessing education. Today, Honorable Speaker, we are able to build school infrastructure, buses for schools, dining halls or multipurpose halls, administration blocks, name them, across the country, courtesy NGCDF. So, we support this. It is long overdue. It is time. I think, members, we need to pass this bill once it gets to the floor of this House so that we can protect NGCDF. And also, we must continue to demystify the notion that NGCDF is managed by members of parliament. We only guide. It is managed by an independent body of the NGCDF board, and we only guide them as they implement the projects. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I support the amendment.
The Honorable Paul Murigi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, also me, I stand to support this proposal of entrenching the NGCDF to Constitution, Mr. Speaker. Of the past, Mr. Speaker, we have encountered many challenges whereby we have been taken to court that we are operating an unconstitutional fund, Mr. Speaker. So this proposal will help us now to see this fund exist without any court cases, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for the 7 years which I have been a member of parliament for Igembe South constituency, this fund has helped me a lot to develop this constituency, Mr. Speaker. And whenever you go in this constituency, Mr. Speaker, most of the projects which are visible in this constituency, Mr. Speaker, are those projects which are developed by NGCDF, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this fund has shown many young people from the poor background go to school, Mr. Speaker. So it has enabled those poor families, Mr. Speaker, who their dreams were deemed, Mr. Speaker, who are not even projecting that maybe in the future there will be somebody in life, Mr. Speaker. This fund has encouraged them and has encouraged them, Mr. Speaker, to attend education, Mr. Speaker, and to show them, Mr. Speaker, be big people in this country, Mr. Speaker. Also, Mr. Speaker, this is one of the funds which exposes the constituent or the public, Mr. Speaker, to public participation, whereby they participate to see what development they want be done in their various areas, Mr. Speaker. Also in security sector, Mr. Speaker, this fund has improved eminently, Mr. Speaker, on these areas, Mr. Speaker, whereby all the police stations, chiefs camps, Mr. Speaker, this fund has built them, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, also the women or the Gulf, Mr. Speaker, also this is another fund, Mr. Speaker, which helps our people on the ground, Mr. Speaker. And also I support it to be entrenched in the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, so that our women can have something, Mr. Speaker, to take to the people on the ground. Mr. Speaker, the people of Igembe South constituency, Mr. Speaker, have given me support for
the Honorable Robert Vasil. Or is Honorable Kwenya?
I came before Duku, that I thought...
Well, you'll speak after him.
You'll speak after me. So thank you, Mr. Speaker. Allow me to add my voice to the members who have spoke before me on the legislative proposal to entrench NCDF in the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. From onset, Mr. Speaker, those who are before or who are in school before the NGCDF was crafted can attest to you that NGCDF has done a tremendous work in bridging the gap on education matters, Mr. Speaker. And the judges who coached away the NGCDF don't seem to understand how NGCDF operates or how it works. And I want to call them, or any Kenyan who is a patriot, to really understand that NGCDF is a very essential kitty which we can't take away from this particular, or from our country. Mr. Speaker, if you recall very well, NGCDF has actually bridged the development gap, Mr. Speaker, across the country. Mr. Speaker, before NGCDF, our parents were overburdened by Arambis, Mr. Speaker. And considering that our budget is not itemized, Mr. Speaker, NGCDF is the only kitty that brings equity on matters with education, matters with security, and other activities that are done by NGCDF, Mr. Speaker. Importantly, our country needs to attain SDG 4, which talks of inclusivity and equity in terms of quality education, Mr. Speaker, and NGCDF will support Kenya to achieve or attain SDG 4 on education. Mr. Speaker, we have something called sphere standards, which you recall for quality education, Mr. Speaker. Without NGCDF, Kenya will fall below in terms of attaining the requirements of sphere standards, which are global measures or global units that guide issues with education, among other issues within our facets of the economy. So, Mr. Speaker, lastly, we talk of gap. Issue to do with equality when it comes to closing the gender gap cannot be attained when we don't have gap. So, Mr. Speaker, anyone who means well for this country should allow us to entrench NGCDF, GAF, and Senate Oversight Fund within the Constitution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. I wish in a very special way to emphatically support this proposal. And I can't wait for that day that we're going to discuss the entrenchment of this bill in the Constitution, so that then we have a Constitution provision whereby CDF is entrenched. And Mr. Speaker, for many reasons. One, for the last 20 years or so, more than 20 years since the introduction of CDF, we know the kind of exploits that this has been able to do in our single constituencies. Some of the members sitting here today are here because they got an enabler through education, through this fund that we so celebrate, that is CDF. Mr. Speaker, I fault the drafters of our Constitution 2010 because I believe, were it not for experiment, because I think we were doing we were trying to reinvent the wheel. We should have devolved our government through the constituency or to the constituency level, so that then we have 290 devolved units of government and do away with the county government. All we did with the devolution that we introduced was to reinvent the wheel and brought about a very expensive units that are becoming very difficult to run and even to oversight. And Mr. Speaker, I think we'll also get some constitutional moment whereby then we should think of disbanding of the county government and having these units as constituencies, because they've turned out to be the most efficient. Constituencies are very efficient. We only spend 6% of the fund on management of the same. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, because of time, I just want to say that CDF is here to stay, and no court of its good standing should pronounce this as unconstitutional, because what is of public interest should be given first preference. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Wilberforce Oundo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Let me stand and go on record to support my colleagues for bringing this constitutional amendment to entrench the NGCDF plus everything else indicated here, Senate oversight plus NGAF. Honorable Speaker, Article 6.3 of the Constitution compels state organs, and that means the government, to reasonable access to services all parts of the country. Secondly, Honorable Speaker, Article 43 has a list of economic and social rights that have literally been met by NGCDF. Honorable Speaker, I happened to be in court on the day of the ruling, and it was a very sad day. Sad day that a bench of court of Kenyans, not foreigners, and that has done nothing. Let us say it has done nothing, or what it has done, it is illegal or unlawful. Honorable Speaker, I forgave them, because the Lord, in the Bible it says, forgive 70 times 70 times. But if I had a way, I would not have forgiven them. Honorable Speaker, The fallacy that a constituency is not a unit of service delivery flies in the face of Article 6.3 of the Constitution. Kenyans live in constituencies. Kenyans do not live in the counties. The counties are just amalgamation of the constituencies. Kenyans who live in those constituencies deserve services. And the services that they deserve are both for the county government and those of the national government. So to say the national government cannot use any other system to take services to the grassroots is literally unfair and a fallacy. Honorable Speaker, actually the truth of the matter, CDF should be tied to the members of parliament. Why do I say so? It's a poisoned chalice to a member of parliament. You mess up with the CDF, the electors will teach you a lesson. You do well with the CDF, electors will for sure will give you another term. So a member of parliament is in immortal fear of being kicked out if he messes up CDF. And that's why the impact of CDF has been more noticeable than anything else. So, Honorable Speaker, I signed and I will continue to advocate for CDF and not to tell Kenyans, CDF is going nowhere. Don't be afraid. Relax. We'll sort these things out. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable John Kawanjiku.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want first to rise and support this motion, and particularly also congratulate the two members, Honorable Chepkonga and the committee that has sat down and come up with the specifics of making sure that we entrench NGCDF and GAF and Senate oversight into the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. It is clear, and I understand that the mood of the House, that the majority of the members understand the concept of the CDF, Mr. Speaker. Many projects that we have undertaken in our constituency, including making sure that we have built modern police post, Mr. Speaker, whereby that in the security sectors that have been neglected for a very long time. When you talk about the education sector, making sure we modernize our public day schools, our public primary schools, making sure that we oversight and make sure that every member of each and every constituency is able to benefit from the bursary, Mr. Speaker, and make sure that we prudently ensure and oversight the money that we have been allocated to us by the NGCDF. Mr. Speaker, we must also say that is the unit of the devolution that really works. Sometimes we normally spend a lot of money giving governors a lot of resources, but you can't be able to locate this money within our constituency. But within the constituency, you can be able to see different projects that has been done by the NGCDF, Mr. Speaker. Even though I was against the Senate Oversight Fund, but I feel like it is high time we also support the Senate so that they also make sure that devolution work and prudent use of government resources through the devolution, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support.
Honorable Joseph Oyula.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to also contribute to this motion. Mr. Speaker, I want to start by thanking Honorable Chepkonga for reviving this motion which was brought to this House more than a year ago. Mr. Speaker, NGCDF has been fought by individuals or groups of individuals who were getting a lot of money from the donors under the pretext that they were paying fees for vulnerable children. So, Mr. Speaker, this is the only route that will enable, that will make these people not to interfere with NGCDF. As it has been said, NGCDF has done a lot of work in the constituencies, and NGCDF must be protected. If you go out here, everybody will tell you, protect the NGCDF because it is the only fund that, that has done projects in the rural areas. So it is important that NGCDF, Gulf, and the other fund be protected by entrenching them in the Constitution. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Jessica Mbalu.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving this opportunity to add my voice in support of the legislative proposal to entrench the NGCDF, the GAF, and the Senator's oversight into the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, as a Member of Parliament representing a constituency, I am aware and I know how far as the NGCDF, especially because we do oversight, has taken or given the social impacts to our people. Mr. Speaker, this is only a fund that is visible on the ground. And Mr. Speaker, being a national government constituency development fund, as it is called, it is a list unit of development that goes to from the national government that goes to the constituencies and to the good people of the country of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, if you look at some of the benefits that we get, for example, the bursaries. Mr. Speaker, we know education is the cash crop of many places, like in my constituency, Kibwesi's constituency in Makueni County. Mr. Speaker, I've seen the social impact, the benefits that have gone to the students who have been able to benefit from the bursaries. When I'm going around doing my oversight, Mr. Speaker, I find parents shedding tears because of the little money, that much money, that a lot of money to them that they get as bursaries, Mr. Speaker, to pay.
Your time is up. The Honorable Jackson, we give her 30 seconds.
Maybe it's a system.
Power has gone. The ICT system.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I think it says ICT, but I will just take your instructions, Mr. Speaker. The benefits of the security, Mr. Speaker, we know what we have done in terms of security. Issues of emergencies that occur in our constituencies. Mr. Speaker, the NGCDF has been able to cater for all that. And so I want to say also, because we have the women reps in the House, Mr. Speaker, when they get gov money and when it is entrenched in the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, we'll be able to walk tall. And as most of us said, we want to promise Kenyans, we are the lawmakers, and we'll ensure that we entrench NCDF and make it constitutional as it is required even by the courts. Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I want to thank you. And
I'd said Bishop Jackson Kosgei.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable
First
Bishop.
of all, I wish to congratulate the Member of Parliament for bringing this constitutional amendment proposal on this fund. It has been said, shared prosperity in a nation enhances two important things. Number one is national pride for its citizens. Also, it brings about inclusiveness in the society, that everybody feels he belongs to that country. And one of the ways that brings this particular prosperity closer to every citizen in a closer and in a very inclusive way is through this system of funding, which touches on every constituency. Mr. Speaker, because I can see time is a bit short, I want to mention I have 3 reasons why. One, you cannot deny citizens a right they have enjoyed. That is the law. 2, the impact of this fund over the years, it has had an impact on the people and it can be seen. And finally, to entrench it in the Constitution. We will ring-fence it against those people who are overseers in trying to tell us what our Constitution says, and ignoring the benefits of certain funds like this one, which has helped to spread devolution more closer to our people. Mr. Speaker, I support.
Honorable Mulanya, Geoffrey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to support this particular motion. Mr. Speaker, first, let me congratulate Honorable Chepkonga for bringing this motion so that we can amend the Constitution to entrench NGCDF in the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, when the court delivered its ruling and declared the NGCDF unconstitutional, I was surprised. But at the same time, when I analyzed further, I realized that the judges we have, there are people who are out of reality with the truth on the ground. Before NGCDF, this country, everybody was a guest of honor in Harambes to try and build schools. But you know that these judges are not participating in these Harambes, so they don't feel the pain people go through to build these schools. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe that instead of helping to develop our jurisprudence by stretching the law to the purpose and the need on the ground, they are trying to interpret the law as it is, which is really affecting the common person. I support this particular amendment, Mr.
The Honorable Sabina Chege.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to join my colleagues in congratulating Honorable Chepkonga and the team. Mr. Speaker, CDF has really brought development on the ground, and not forgetting GAF that we as women rep fought for, so that our women members of the county can be able to go to the ground and have an impact. Mr. Speaker, the issue of GAF, though not well, a lot of people speak about it, maybe because of the numbers. It has direct impact on our youth and our mothers, and so we would also, I hope that GAF is also going to be entrenched. But even as we say we want the Senate oversight to be entrenched in the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, we need to have a look at it and see what really is the fund supposed or meant to be. Mr. Speaker, as I finish, I just want to say that as we break for Christmas, it has been a tough year for this Parliament. We have had our lessons to learn. Mr. Speaker, as I want to wish every member of this House Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and the public at large, I want to urge that we keep peace and beg Kenyans, as your leaders come in, they are fighting for this CDF and GAF and all the funds for your benefit. Kindly allow them to work. We may differ in opinions, but allow your members to come to the ground and work together with you.
Honorable Francis Igei, then Honorable Jemachia.
Honorable Speaker, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to also support my colleagues on this very important amendment. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to start by thanking the Honorable Chepkonga, the MP of Ainabkoi, for coming up with this amendment proposal. Mr. Speaker, this fund, NGCDF, is one of the most popular fund down there at the grassroots. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that the NGCDF is the real devolution in this country. We have this felt, and anybody opposing this NGCDF, Mr. Speaker, is fighting the poor of the poorest. Mr. Speaker, I want to say we are very happy this time that we are going to make the busybodies to be no longer relevant in this country, because they have done a lot of damage.
Honorable Jematia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this motion on entrenchment in the Constitution on the county and constituency fund. But also I want to speak for NGAF. Mr. Speaker, I must say the proponents of the Constitution was misguided. Because if you look at the funds that women rep get in